Hello everyone and welcome to a new video here on Phloshop. My name is Joseph. This video is by popular demand because people were asking me to show them how I was going to post-process these photos, just because I did a little bit of a demo in one of my other videos where I was just playing with the color, and I think people were really excited and they wanted me to do a dedicated video on that. So that's what this video is about. I'm going to be editing from Capture One and then moving it into Photoshop and then adding my final touches onto it. So let's just start actually. So one thing I noticed is that Canon cameras generally, when they are being translated inside Capture One, they always tend to have like a lot of reds in there. And what I used to do was I'll move it from generic to like pro standard, and you can see that it does take away the reds in the image, but sometimes it just adds a bit of like a yellow green tint, and that is also something that I don't want. Rather, I will want to have like as much control over the colors as much as possible, right? So what I did is I did create some styles that you can apply onto your image directly. So for example, if I go into my custom styles and I add my dark tone, you can see that it has stylized this image. So this can be like a color grade that you're going with, or I can just move it into dark tone desat, and you can see that it's desaturating some colors. Obviously you can apply like something like this and then adjust it afterwards. So if I right click, for example, and then click on apply to new layer, what this is going to do is just apply these adjustments onto a new layer so that I have even more control. For example, I can reduce my opacity if I feel like this effect is too strong, or anywhere you can see these brush icons, you can just click on those and then add more adjustments. So for example, if I go into exposure, I can reduce the contrast in the image even more. I can also reduce the saturation. You can see that it is applying to the image still, right? If I go into high dynamic range, I can still see the adjustments that the preset already had and then fine tune it even further. So for example, I can open up the shadows, I can bring back the highlights, I can do all of those things. And on top of that, I can still go back into layers and reduce the opacity just in case I just want a little bit of that effect there. So if I do it before and after, you can see that truly these styles are unique and you can customize them to fit whatever needs you are. So if you want this, the link is down below. You will find it in my digital store. All right, but what I want to do is actually do everything from scratch. So let me just delete this, and we're going to start with a special kind of treatment that I want to apply to this image. So the first thing I want to do is again start with my basic characteristics where I can change the ICC profile. But over here, what I'm going to do is just move all the way down to effects, and I'm going to come down to no color correction. So over here, Capture One isn't really adding any effects or colors to the image, and I can still go further and enhance it if I need to. So the first thing I will do is just go into my dehaze, and over here what I want to do is just add a bit of dehaze in there, because you can see that as I flatten it, it's just taking a lot of the colors out, and I just want to add a bit more contrast or pump into the image. So from here I'm going to go into exposure, and what I want to do is just bring the exposure down a little bit, all right, just like that, and also just reduce the contrast just so we can see a little bit of information in the shadows. And I'm just going to reduce the brightness as well, because what I'm trying to achieve here is just trying to maximize the latitude of the raw file, or bring back as much information as I can, and then prepare it for all the adjustments I'm going to be making inside Photoshop whilst stylizing the image as well. So this is already like a very decent area, and I can still go further and add more adjustments if I need. So for example, I'm going to go into curves, and over here I want to stick with the luma, and what I want to do is just open up the highlights just a little bit. So something like this I feel should be fine. And if I just activate my before and after, you can see that this is where we started from. Very saturated, very rich in color. It's nice and everything. I could have just toned down the colors a little bit, but this, you can see that I have more control. I can pick and choose what colors I want to saturate in there, but we're going step by step. All right, now I'm going to go into high dynamic range because I don't really want to do anything inside the levels just yet. And what I'll do is I'll just bring down the highlights ever so slightly. I would also bring the shadows down just to add a tiny bit of contrast. Actually, I feel like let me rather open up the shadows. So maybe opening it somewhere around here I think will look good, and also open up the whites just so we add a bit of brightness to the image. Then I'm also going to open up the blacks just so we don't have it flattening or being crashed out completely. All right, so from here what I want to do now is again go into sharpening, because if I zoom into the image, you'll see that Capture One has added a ton of sharpening. So I'm just going to reduce all of that just to give the image a very organic feel, because then again the effect I want is something something that looks a bit like a painting, something that looks more artsy, and that digital sharpness takes away that feel. And so by removing the sharpening and the contrast, it's just going to give me that level of control. I don't think I'm going to do anything inside color balance just yet, so I'm just going to go straight into color editor, and this is where I have inside the basic tab a chance to pick and pull the colors that I want to be present, or even manipulate them further. So inside the reds, for example, I'm going to move that more towards like the reddish tint, and I'm actually going to saturate it because you can see her skin is looking a little bit pale when it's at 0. So I just want to add like a lot of saturation just now, and also just add a bit of darkening so I can reduce the depth of the red in the image. So somewhere around here I think looks good. We're going to be doing this for majority of the colors that I feel are present in the image, and then we'll build off that and fine tune it together. I haven't adjusted these, I'm just playing around to see what actually works. Again, I want to saturate the orange tones in the image, and I'm also just going to darken that down a little bit. You can see that we are adding some nice effects to the image. So here's a before, and I can see how inorganic this image looks, and over here you can see that we are retaining some details in the highlights. We are bringing back some information in the shadows, and we're just bringing a lot of information back in the image. Now what I'm going to do is go into the yellows, and in there what I'm going to do is just move that a little bit more towards the yellow tint, somewhere like that, and I'm going to saturate it a ton because you can see that her jewelry has like yellow in there, and I just want to saturate that a lot so it's a little bit more prominent, even though we have a tiny bit of those colors present in the skin. I'm also going to open up the lightness so it's just a tad bit brighter, and I'm going to go straight away because I can see that there are no greens in there. I'll go into the cyans, and what I'll do is just move cyans towards blue a little bit so that we have any colors that are a little bit more towards cyan, then we can also just shift that towards blue a little bit. All right, I'm going to go into the blues, and what I'm going to do over here is actually moving more towards purple so it's a little closer to the fabric that is down here, so we have more of a uniform color tone going on. And I'm going to saturate that as well, something like that. Actually saturate it quite a bit, and I'm also going to lighten that up so it's not too in your face. All right, I'm going to go into the magentas, and I'm going to shift those towards blue. So again, now I'm moving the colors down here more towards the backdrop color, again just so it's a little bit more uniform, and I'm just brightening that and see what that does. All right, I'm going to go into magenta and see if I can move that also towards blue, saturate that a little bit, make it brighter or darker, just a tiny bit of an adjustment. I'm going to go into film grain, and I will just add a tiny bit of silver rich grain, and this pretty much is the area that I'm looking at. So I'm going to go into exposure now, and what I feel I want to do is just bring back a tiny bit of the saturation, just like that, ever so slightly. And I'm going to go into reds and just bring back the lightness, go into orange, maybe just darken that a little bit, and just saturate it a tiny bit more and shift that a little bit more towards red. I'll go into the yellows, and I'll just try and keep those more into yellow, saturate that maybe like even all the way, and make it a tiny bit lighter. So if I zoom in, this is our after, this is our before, after. You can see that it's really isn't so much of a change, but you can see the effects like practically in her outfits. Over here you can see that we have brought detail back. Over here it was a little bit too bright, here we have some details in there, and if you look at the shadows in the gloves, we've brought all of that back. We've just expanded the latitude in the image, and this makes a lot of sense to me. But I still want to keep a bit of the brightness in the outfit, so I'm going to go back into high dynamic range, and I'm actually going to brighten the white some more, and then do the same thing with the highlights, just move that up because I feel like that bright high key effect just looks good, and I want to maintain that. So now that we have this, right, so here's our before, here's our after, before, after, we can add the contrast we need back inside Photoshop, and I will do that later. So I'm going to right click this, go on into edit with, and click on Photoshop 2023, and I'm going to edit variants. So this is going to open up inside Photoshop, and now we can proceed with our editing. All right, so now that we have prepared this file from Capture One and brought it into Photoshop, I want to look at the area that I'm going to be most concerned with, and I'm going to be posting this on Instagram, right? So I just want to make sure that my ratio is 4:5 or 8:10, and that pretty much will fit Instagram. I want to add a bit more of a head space, so I'm just going to move this down somewhere like that and hit on enter. So now that we have this as our crop or as our frame, I want to fill the top here with some more fabric. So I'm just going to hit S from the clone stamp tool, and what I'm going to do is just zoom in paint a little bit, and I'm going to create a new layer and sample somewhere around here, and I'm just going to paint that gradually into the rest of the fabric. So now this is what we have. It's completely done and I absolutely love it. All right, so now that we've been able to, you know, clean that patch up and everything looks seamless, what we are going to do first of all is to remove some blemishes. Again, this is not like a very detailed beauty shoot, and I also wanted this raw organic feel, so my intention is not to get rid of every single thing. So what I'm going to do first of all is create a brand new layer, and I'm going to use my healing brush tool to get rid of some of the blemishes that immediately stand out to me. And the way I'm doing it is by hitting on the Alt key, sampling a clean area, and then just painting over the blemishes. If you've seen my other videos that go more in depth on, you know, beauty retouching and stuff like that, you will have more access, more information. So I'm going to link that video because that is longer and more detailed, but this I'm just skimming through, and I'm going to be forwarding this part just because I don't want this video to be extra long. So if you want that full tutorial, I'm going to link it, but for now I'm just speeding up this process. Okay, so now that we've been able to get rid of, you know, these blemishes that were showing through, thankfully she doesn't really have a lot of blemishes. Actually, before I proceed, let me just get rid of this excess fabric. I'm using the clone stamp tool. I'm sampling like a very good area and then just painting over that. I don't want this excess fabric to show. So this is where we're going to be using my workflow action. So if you don't have that, you can get it. Link is in my description box. I'm going to be using that entirely to retouch this photo. Okay, so from here, I'm going to go into my actions. I'm going to click on the 16-bit frequency separation action. I'm going to run that. And I'm going to choose a very high radius, maybe somewhere around 14. Let me just type that in. And when I look at the preview, I can see that I can still identify my subject, you know, even though it is blurry. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to get rid of this FS helper because I don't need it in this case. Again, I'm not being very detailed. I'm going to move on to the blur copy, hit B for my brush tool, and I'm going to start with my mixer brush. Okay. Now, what I want to do is just start painting over areas that are transitioning between light and dark, or light, medium, and dark. And I'm just painting over those so that the transition is a lot smoother. That's one thing that you can do to help, you know, make your images look three-dimensional, to give it like a very clean look without necessarily looking over retouched. Again, my painting on the strokes are not going to be very heavy-handed, again, because I don't want it to be very visible that I've done things like this, and also because I want to keep this natural feel, because you can see that she didn't have any makeup on. I want to still keep that organic feel. And so my mission is not to get rid of every single pore or every single texture and then make it look extremely porcelain. Also, if you want to, you know, understand how I'm using the mixer brush, if you want an in-depth video, again, I'm going to be linking that same video because that was like really extended, really in-depth, and so you get a better understanding of how I'm doing things. But again, what I'm doing is just smoothing things out, so I'm going to speed this process up. Alright, so now that I've done that, if I just do a quick before and after, you can see that we did, you know, even out some of the transitions. It's looking a lot smoother. The highlights are moving into the midtones and shadows really evenly, and that is what I like, right? But I feel like this was a little bit overdone, so I'm going to bring my opacity down to, let's say, about 76%, so I can keep that raw detail seeping through this frequency separation stage that I applied. What I'm going to do next is go back into my actions and look for my dodge and burn complete, and I'm going to run that. Again, I don't want this, actually let me just keep the contrast, but what I'm going to do is just play with the curves. So I'm going to lift up the shadow so I can see, you know, information in the image, and bring the highlights down just by reducing the contrast a little bit. And what I'm going to do now is go into my dodge layer and use a regular brush. I'll change the flow to about you know, let's say 14%. Or let me just make it 20, and I'll keep the flow at 14% for now. So inside my dodging, what I want to do is just use a soft brush and just go into the areas that, you know, I feel are too dark for where they are present, and I'm just going to be lightening that, making sure that my foreground is set to white. Okay, and I'm painting on the layer mask. That is very important. If I just do a quick demo for you guys to see what I've done so far, let me just zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. Here's before And here's after, before, after. You can see that it is a very slow process. Dodging and burning is always very slow, but if you take your time, if you spend more time and study and understand how it works, you really will be able to create, very, very detailed retouching that looks very organic and natural. Most of the professional, like high-end retouchers strictly use dodging and burning. But for me, I feel like it's a very painstaking process. And if I'm supposed to be retouching quite a number of these photos, it means I'm not going to be done anytime soon. So I like to mix frequency separation with dodging and burning and, just adjusting the opacities for them to blend together with each other. And I feel that gives me more control. I'm able to work faster and still retain a lot of detail and keep some natural look to my images. So that is the style that I have found and works for me. It's now up to you guys to also experiment and figure out what's going to be working for you. What I'm also doing is I'm shifting between dodging and burning. So I'll go to my dodge layer to brighten areas. I'll go to my burn layer and darken areas, at the same time. First, what I'll do is probably finish all of the dodging and then come back in and do like all of the burning. But I'm just doing this simultaneously because, again, I'm not being very, very detailed and I just want to go as fast as I can. So this is pretty much what I'll be doing for the entirety of this stage. Again, I'm going to forward this so the video isn't too long. Alright, so now that I have been able to do the micro dodge and burn, I'm calling this micro because I was paying more attention to like those little transitions. I wasn't paying attention to like a global one. I'm just doing it before and after. You can see that we've been able to define the shape of her face a little bit more. I'm going to go back into the burn and I feel like you just have to darken, some of these areas down a little bit because it's not really smooth. So that's it. You have to be able to visualize and see if you're either doing too much or too little, and then try and fix as much as you can in this stage, because the next thing we're going to be doing is running another dodging and burning. But what that is supposed to do is affect the image globally. All right, so I'm quite happy with this. So what I'll do is just go back into my actions and I'm going to run the dodge and burn complete again. I mean, I could actually do that, or I could actually select the burn, select the dodge and click on play, and it's going to run those individual actions for me. So let me just stick with this so you guys can see that you have this option as well. I'm going to go back into dodging and I'm going to make the brush a lot bigger and then just paint over the areas, with bigger strokes. Wherever that highlights, I'm going to paint over those just to make it more pronounced, more prominent in the image, just like that. Even her fingers, the gloves, anywhere, the jewelry, anywhere like there's a highlight, I'm just going to be, let me just go up on the opacity to about 48% because I want this to be very strong, because we will fine tune the strength with the opacity attached to the dodge layer. I'm also doing the same thing for the outfit. So anywhere I feel like it's a highlight that needs to be brightened, I'm just going over with this. So when I do it before, you can see that we have brightened, the image a tiny bit. I'm going to go into burn and do the opposite. So wherever I feel like needs a bit of darkening, I'm just going to be darkening that area down as well. So this is where you're able to add more shape, to your image, give it that three-dimensional pop. It's a very important stage. You really need to be careful so you don't disfigure the subject. Always just follow the natural highlights and shadows that your lighting pattern created, because I feel like if you've been following the channel for a while, you know that me positioning my lights in certain areas is very, very important. You can even decide to do the same thing to the backdrop. So I'm going to go over the areas that have some shadow and I'm just going to make those more prominent, just like that. And then I'll go back into my dodge, and wherever there's a highlight, I'm going to go over and brighten those up. I hope you can already see the effect and how much of a pop we've added to the image already. I'm gonna increase the opacity to 100 this time, and what I want to do is make my brush smaller and then just paint over the jewelry. All right, so if I group these and call it 3D pop, and and do it before and after, you can see that we've really added more depth to the shot and it's really popping out. But this again is a little bit too much, so all I'll do is just bring the opacity down to about 50% before and after. We've added a little bit of a pop to the image, right? And I kind of like this. I'm going to go back to my original dodge and burn and also bring that layer down to about 75%. And now when I do a general before and after, you can see that we've added a little change to the image and we've made it really pop, standing out. I really like what we've done. One last thing I want to do is just get rid of some of these lines along her face, and I'm going to use the patch tool for that. But in order for me to do that, I need to merge or create a stamp visible of everything that I have. So I'm going to hit Shift, Option, Command and E, and that's going to merge everything that we've done and put it on a brand new layer. I'm going to hit J for my healing brush tool. I'm going to press and hold and click on the patch tool. Now what I'm going to do is just draw around, this area that I want to reduce, move it to a clean area just like that. And what I'll do is go into edit, come down to fade patch tool, and I'm going to reduce this till it just blends into her skin nicely, something like that. Press OK, and this is what we have. So before, after, before, after. All right, I'll do the same thing over here, drag that down, go into edit, fade patch tool, bring it down to 50, press enter, and just do the same thing around here as well. Bring that down, go to edit, fade patch tool, and 50%. Press enter. Okay, now that we have all of this done, I can even further reduce the opacity of that layer and just have a little bit of a cleanup going on there. I feel like what we've done so far is looking good. Just zoom out a bit. What I will do is just go into my actions, and we're going to look for my Phloshop color grading tool. I'm going to press play on that. It will create all the necessary layers I need for color grading, and I'm going to reduce the opacity of the whole layer somewhere like that, about 35%, because I don't want the effect to be very, very strong. And I'm going to go into set colors. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to define the colors that I want to be present in the shadows and in the highlights, right? So over there in the blacks, I think I just want to put a bit of like a cool tone in there, something along these lines. Press OK, and in the highlights, I think I'm just going to warm it up a little bit. Let me go more into reds and see what that does. Yeah, I think I'm liking this. I'm going to drag this more into the shot, and I'll change the color and go more towards like a blue tone. And I'm going to add one more node here, and I'm just going to make that even darker and maybe just desaturate it a little bit as well. Press OK, press OK over here. And now I'm going to go into my auxiliary coloring, and I'm just going to move the slider around and see if it presents me with any colors that I like. And I think I really like, what this is giving me around plus 18. I'm going to saturate that a little bit and also make it a tiny bit brighter and see what that does. I think I'm going to go more on the saturation. Yeah, that looks good. So before, after, before, after. I think it really adds a lot of contrast. So I'm going to go into dynamic boost, and I'm going to lift the blacks even more. Actually, let me just lift it in the shadows. Just like that. What I'm going to do to finalize this is I'm just going to go into selective color, and inside the whites, I just want to tone that down, maybe add a bit of yellow. So I'm just going to add a tiny bit of yellow over here and see what else I can add to it. I just want to tint the outfit that she's wearing slightly, maybe even make it brighter as well. I'll go into the midtones and just add a tiny bit of color in there, mostly inside the yellows. Maybe play with magenta just a little bit. Let's see if we can add some colors into the shadows as well. Yeah, maybe just add a bit of blue, maybe +1 on the magenta. I don't think I want to add or subtract any cyan, so I just keep that as 0. Here's before, here's after. I like the tint, but again, I'm just going to reduce that just a little bit like so. Go back into my color grading tool and even reduce the opacity of that. If I want it to be strong, I can do that, but I just want a little bit of a tint in there. Then I'm going to go into vibrance, and I'm just going to add some vibrance to the shot and just add a tiny bit of saturation as well. And for the final touch, I am just going to go into my actions, and I'm going to look for noise and it's going to add a bit of noise. Press OK. Yeah, I think this looks good. Increase the opacity. Yeah, I think I like it at 50%. Let me just type that in. And when I group all of this, they should give us, you know, a very nice before and after. So this is where we started from, you know, technically, and this is where we are now. You can see we filled the backdrop, added our own colors the way we want. Everything is looking really good. I absolutely love it. We, you know, took care of the blemishes, smoothing the transitions, and everything is looking really good. I think I'm quite happy with what we have now. We're gonna go back into Capture One, and this is our final shot. All right. So if I just go back to the original and reset that. Actually, before I do, let me copy the adjustments and paste it here just in case. I'm gonna reset this. So this is where we started from. Let me change the crop to a 4:5 as well. Move it up a bit. All right, so the image on the left is where we started from. The image on the right is what I'm done with. I love it. I love the way I've been able to control all the colors. Let me know how you feel about them in the comments down below. And if you like tutorials like this, let me know in the comments down below as well. And I'll catch you guys in the next video, but also check out my digital store. I have products in there that are going to help you, you know, especially if you get my workflow actions, going to help you create a system for retouching. And then if you want to play with color, you have my color grading tool, which makes color grading fun, interactive. You can also play with my melanin skin tone LUTs. That's very, very good for dark skin tones. And I have some, you know, LUTs and presets again that you can play with. All of those are available on my digital store. And I also have some one-on-one consultation just in case you want to have one-on-one sessions, you know, so I can answer your questions privately. You can check that out. And, you know, I'll catch you guys in the next video. And remember, don't ever give up.